Hi everyone, my name is James Tang. I am co-producer and co-director of the film Ghost Mountain. I am also the founder of the Pravi Heer Foundation, which helped to produce this film. This film is called The Second Killing Fields of Cambodia because it tells of the untold story about when 45,000 innocent Cambodian refugees were sent from the refugee camps on the west side of the Thai-Cambodian border and sent many, many miles away overnight to a mountaintop called Pravi Heer Mountain, an area that was heavily guarded and studded with landmines. And the Thai military did the most unspeakable and inhumane and horrifying act of sending these innocent refugees, many of my family included as part of those tens of thousands of refugees, down this mountain. And those who resisted that forced repatriation were violently mowed down by Thai soldiers. This story was completely untold for almost 4 decades and a half, and most recently, many people have been hearing about it, especially in Cambodia, given the Thai-Cambodian conflict today. Now, if you haven't watched Ghost Mountain, I would encourage you to go watch it. You can look underneath here at this in the channel, and you can find the link for it. It's a short film of only 40 minutes. We and my team have been really just pleased to see the reception in Cambodia over this film and how they too saw what I saw many, many years ago when I first encountered this story, that this was a story that needed to be told and that this was critically important history. And right now, Cambodians feel like this is important history for Khmer people. As a Khmer American, I believe that as well. But I also believe that this story is important for the rest of the world to know. That this incomprehensible episode and this barbaric act should never happen to innocent people. And that we should do anything possible to preserve human rights and human dignity. We ought to really count the cost of what war and conflict does. So I went about to create the Pravi Heer Foundation to make sure to memorialize this story, to preserve it and archive what it is so that yes, Cambodia would know this story in the rest of the world. So I will be continuing to do further videos. I'm going to do a video right now addressing some of the responses that I've seen from the film. There have been great responses of people really just grateful for hearing this story. We've been hearing about the survivors who have gone through this, and we're thankful that they were finally being seen for once. And, and I'm thankful to hear that as well, because for once, those who lost their lives won't be forgotten. And the other responses have been really of complete and utter disbelief. And the utter disbelief has gone to the side of this is incomprehensible for any one country to do, any country's military to do, and it's a complete lie or fabrication. And that this is all propaganda, and that I am a prop for the Cambodian government. I can see how that can be a completely natural response, given of how horrifying this atrocity is, and really what was a really good seen as a particular type of narrative about what had happened on the Thai-Cambodian border. So I will go through and I will take the time to go and try to, and I will present the evidences that were done not by the survivors, because I think those who are skeptical about this event will discount and discredit or try to discredit the survivors and their written accounts. And there are a handful that I have that I will share at some point. But I will actually go through what Western journalists and very reputable people have actually written. And some of this material was written in the 1980s. Some of it was declassified material just 10 years ago by my own US government. Cables from the ambassador to Thailand, Morton Brownwitz. And you should see that it is truly clearly seen that this incident did in fact happen. And it will be indisputable, and it will raise enormous amount of questions as to why was this done? Why were these innocent refugees taken there? And why was it done in this particular place, right next to Pravi Heer Temple? Some of those I would try to answer myself, and those are questions that I think once I go through all this, we will all should be asking. The interviews of State Department workers, the ambassador of Thailand, Morten Bromwitz. I have Lionel Rosenblatt, who had headed much of the rescue effort, gave their accounts of the incident that took place at Pravi Hier. And for whatever reason, it was still lacking to convince the people of Thailand that this was still not a fabricated film that we had made. So I will go through much more in depth here to show you the actual books and account that everyone can go and look at. And the first one here is this book called The Quality of Mercy, written by William Shawcross, who is a very well-known British journalist. And it's going to start at pages 83. And he chronicles the history, really what was transpiring in 1979, which was now the Vietnamese were, by December of 1978, had taken over Cambodia and were moving through the rest of the country. They had deposed them from Phnom Penh. And refugees were starting to flee into Thailand. And so now Thailand has a situation on their hands. And I will agree, as with every country is now having a border issue in the world, we all sort of understand this. I understand this as well, that the border is a place of big contention and of great fear. And this is very true for Thailand itself, having seen communism spill over from country to country, from China to Vietnam to Cambodia to Laos, and now at their doorsteps. They're very concerned about the invasion of potentially communists, potentially the Vietnamese, or refugees themselves coming in and flooding and straining economically their country and potentially destabilizing it like it had done to every other country. And Thailand had been one of those countries that was very successful and not being colonized and fending off outside influence there. So I think we all can understand this point here. But I will raise questions as to, it's not just the what, it's also the how this was done. That really matters a lot. And so on page 83 in this book, Quality of Mercy, it says, early in January 1979, Paul Hartling, a former Danish prime minister who was now the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, sent a telegram to General Khan Sak, offering UNHCR help in dealing with new Cambodian refugees fleeing the fighting between Vietnamese and Khmer Rouge troops. The offer was ignored. Instead, Thailand labeled those new arrivals illegal immigrants and confined them to camps separate from those who had arrived before the Vietnamese invasion. Even relatives who had come hoping to join those who had fled before were kept apart. The government attempted to keep only journalists, but also all international aid officials away from them. It writes, in the first week of May 1979, UNHCR was made aware of another terrible incident. A diligent UNHCR officer, Ove Europe Peterson, heard that in Buriram province, 826 Cambodians had been removed on April 15th. The Thai district officer was unable to give any information, as the matter was under the responsibility of the army, that the Cambodians had been ordered out of the buses and made to walk for 2.5 hours to a large mountain which had a steep cliff on one side, 150 to 200 meters high. The whole group was pushed over by Thai soldiers and killed. The Thai military was already sending refugees and pushing them back to Cambodia. This was official policy. And before they were sending them to Pravi Hier, a mountain, that they were actually taking them nearby in the Dang Rak Mountains and were pushing them off the cliffs. Now, this was set up as a prelude to the more horrifying incident that they would do a few weeks later. And so they were already doing at a small sampling at small levels some of this already. On May 3rd, High Commissioner Paul Hartling finally reacted to the reports of forced repatriation. He wrote a private letter to Prime Minister Khan Sak in which he spoke of a matter of utmost gravity,
Recent reports indicate that large groups of Kampucheans are seeking at least temporary asylum in Thailand. Many are entirely innocent victims of events of which they had no control. They fear and experience of others has proved that if they return to Kampuchea at present, they would face unbearable suffering and quite possibly death. My appeal to you, let such persons stay in Thailand so that their lives might be saved. The letter had no obvious effect. On May 7th, the Bangkok World reported that 250 refugees were pushed back into Cambodia the day before, despite their pleas to stay in fear of being killed by the Khmer Rouge. Now, Kurt Waldheim, the Secretary General of UN, was at a dinner with Prime Minister Kron Sak on May 14th. He raised the matter and asked the Thai government not to push back more refugees in Cambodia. In response, Kron Sak said that the Thai authorities were not pushing back, but were merely trying to persuade them to return. Kron Sak proposed that what he called a pragmatic solution. The UN provide Thailand with food and money for the refugees, but they would remain under Thai control. Then another guest, the Minister of the Interior, General-elect Nayo Mali, apologized if the pronunciation is incorrect. I've never heard this word. Emphasized that what Thailand required was money, not words, money in hand. The Thai Prime Minister added that food for the new arrivals should be brought in Thailand. It would be distributed by Thais. He did not want any foreign relief officials in the field. Send the supplies to us. We will do it. That's page 887. Now, the Thai press was filled now with daily denunciations of the refugees and the hypocrisy of the West in accepting only a few of them. Prime Minister Kron Sak complained constantly to the Western ambassadors and others that the world was only interested in the boat people and did not care what happened along the Thai-Cambodian border. The Thai military became even more exasperated than Prime Minister. One subsequent UNHCR internal history noted that the Prime Minister was under considerable pressure from various groups within Thai political and military circles, as well as external pressure from China as regards Thailand's overt stance of neutrality in the face of what was considered a clear position of aggression on the part of the Vietnamese government. On one occasion, Kron Sak said to another author that the Cambodian refugees were conceived by U.S. policies during the 1970 and 75 war and were delivered by Vietnam. Why should they be left on our doorstep? Now it goes into the story here, and here's when the probably here stuff happens. On the morning of Friday, June 8th, 110 buses pulled up at the border of Nong Chan, a few miles north of Reno Patet, where several thousand refugees were now camped in fields. Thai soldiers in the buses told the refugees they were being moved to another, better camp. Some refugees seemed to believe what they said or were told and were happy enough to leave the squalid, overcrowded conditions of Nong Chan. Others were not. One woman who had walked out of Cambodia to Nong Chan with their 3 children only a week before said later that she was terrified when the Thai soldiers began to herd them into buses. Now the buses, there's this question about that I've been getting in the comments is, this is preposterous. This is so laughable. How can you send 45,000 refugees all at once to this area? Give me evidence. How many buses would that take? And they give me their figures in the thousands of how many buses that would be needed to undertake such an operation. And I think that this paragraph here answers that question very clearly. And I've answered it in the comment section. It hasn't been asked anymore. But that the repatriation or the deportation of these refugees back to Cambodia at Pravihir Mountain happened over multiple days. And these buses, most likely, it sounds like, went back and forth. So for this one camp, there was 110 buses for several thousand refugees. And so you can imagine going back and forth. I think you would only need maybe, I'd have to do the math, 300 buses if they're going back and forth over several days or a week to bring them there. Not a whole lot. And it could be done where nobody sees, because that whole area is uninhabited. So it's not hard to take them from one city out to all the way east to probably here. Now continuing, the buses first drove west, away from the Thai border. This calmed the refugees and raised their hopes. Then the buses turned north, and finally, after a long journey, they turned east back towards Cambodia. There was silence in the buses. At the same time, refugees were being taken from another camp from Wat Ka camp inside the town of Rangitapatat, and that's the camp my father was in. That's the story that he goes into. And these were the people whom Kurt Waldheim had visited. His blessing had evidently conferred no protection. He had visited that camp earlier. Loaded with Cambodian refugees from temporary camp sites all over eastern Thailand, hundreds of buses converge on a mountainous region of the northeastern border near the Temple of Pravihir, whose ownership had long been a source of bitter dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. They arrived with military precision after dark. So there we go. It is not some place in the Dang Rock Mountains, Dang Rek. It is not some random place at all, but that this specific location the refugees were sent to precisely was at Pravihir, by Pravihir Temple. It's an important distinction. The border had been sealed off by Thai soldiers, the area flooded with troops. The refugees were ordered busload by busload to walk back into Cambodia. They were told that there was a path down the mountain, but that on either side of it were landmines. They were also told on the other side the Vietnamese army was waiting to welcome them. This is one of the objections that comes from kind of our apologists for this action that had taken place, is that, maybe the Thai military had made a mistake and they just sent them there, and they did not know that they were minefields or landmines in that area. And I think this paragraph clearly shows that they knew fully what they were doing. They knew in advance that this whole area was mine. And of course, they probably had watched, if it was a military post, the Khmer Rouge planting landmines there. The Vietnamese, who probably just conquered it or taken it over, were planting landmines. They knew that this whole area was studded. And that's not very hard to really figure out. When you send your first bus of Muslim Cham refugees down this mountain, and you see several people being blown up there, I have video footage of testimonies of people talking about that. They were the first bus there. You would know that this is not a safe spot to send refugees down. You would choose another location. But that was not the case. It was made to be a dangerous terrain, and not just dangerous, lethal terrain, fatal terrain, and that was the place of choice in which the Thai military wanted the refugees to go through. It's very sick, it's very sad, it's very diabolical and appalling, and that's what happened. The book goes on, the path down the mountains became steeper, the jungle thicker, dozens, scores of people fell onto mines. Those with possessions had abandoned them to cover their children down. One group of refugees desperately pooled whatever valuables they had left, filled 2 buckets with them, and walked back up toward the Thai soldiers carrying a white flag. The soldiers took the buckets and opened fire on the refugees. That was the hardest part for me to read when I learned about the story, was that the soldiers themselves were, they were under probably military command, but they were shooting on the refugees. It wasn't enough to just let the refugees go through the minefields. So these refugees were caught between 2 hard places. If you went down into the minefield, you'd probably face being blown up. And if you went up, it would be really mowed down violently by the Thai soldiers. And so Cambodians, and I think this is also a Thai saying, call this being between a crocodile and a tiger. The crocodile is the mines at the bottom, and the tiger is the Thai soldiers at the top. It was just very barbaric. For days, this operation went on. Altogether, between 43,000 and 45,000 people were pushed down the cliffs at Pravihir. It took 3 days to cross the minefield. Water was very hard to find. Some people had salt, very few had food. The Thais had distributed at most a couple of rice per person before the buses were emptied. One refugee finally managed to escape back to Thailand and told UNHCR officials. The crowd was very dense. It was impossible to number the victims of the landmines. The wounded people were moaning. The most difficult part of the walk was the near-dead bodies. Tears I thought had dried up long ago came back to my eyes because of the sight from the thought that those innocent people had paid their lives for their attempt to reach freedom in a world that was too selfish. The world knew what was going on. The story of Pravihir was well reported by both journalists and diplomats, even as it was taking place. Now it writes, Henry Kam, which this is the one I'm going to read very quickly as well, wrote dramatic moving accounts in the New York Times. So did Roland Pierce Parlinux in the Le Monde. On June 11, Jean Christopher Uberg, the Swedish ambassador, cabled Stockholm, "What should have been a long predicted is now fact: forced repatriation. No protests or insubstantial threats will change the royal Thai government's mood. The decision has been in the conviction that the international community has shown a notorious lack of interest in this decision." At lunch, and this is page 90, with Uberg, the Swedish ambassador, on June 14th, Kronsak said that the decision had been imposed upon him by Supreme Command. Nonetheless, he was pleased at the international furor it had aroused. At last, Thailand was receiving attention. A few days later, Kronsak told later Turkmen, an assistant secretary general and special envoy from Kurt Waldheim, that he had public support for the repatriation. I'll speak more on that later, as the dilemma Kronsak had. Through the rest of June and early July, the refugees remained stranded in no man's land of Pravihir. They received little food and water from Thai villagers, but not nearly enough. The Vietnamese army, which was close by, on the other hand, also gave them some food, but was very hesitant about allowing them through. What did the UN High Commissioner for Refugees do on their behalf? Eventually, about 2,000 people were rescued with the help of the U.S. Embassy, UNHCR. This proved that the policy of trying not to offend the Thais had failed, since over April, repatriation had encouraged, not deterred, the repatriation of 45,000. So that is from The Quality of Mercy that had laid this story out very clearly. And it was one of the first accounts put in a book there. Now, I'm going to read next is, if that was not enough, this is something that should be, which is now a declassified cable that was sent from Morton Abramowitz. I think it was back to the United States. And this was only declassified in March 20th, 2014. So that was just 9 years ago. And so this is dated July 5th, 1979. And the subject is Care of Repatriated Khmers. Talk with PM Kronsak. And so we read here, this will be available for everybody in a link. I can share this because this is from my own U.S. government. And you can see it's a .gov. So nobody can ever deny that this is completely fake or fabricated or AI generated. I also have archives of it, so it's there now. Now it has in the section, I had a 2-hour conversation with Kronsak afternoon, July 4th, covering mostly the refugee situation, but also a number of other Indochina subjects. This cable covers portions devoted to repatriated Khmers. Now, this is amazing to me to read these accounts by the diplomats and government officials, because I've heard at first this story from my father and from the interviewees, and when I get into the area of government archives, it really is like history coming to life there. And I've been having to dissect it, and it's quite amazing to me to receive such a clear and very well documented really incident here. This was not just a thing that only happened in the shadows everywhere that nobody will ever hear about. This was something that involved intergovernmental parties. It was a big deal, is what I'm trying to say here. And this is what this cable shows. I took about 15 minutes to review what we knew about the repatriated Khmers, their plight, our efforts to help them, and the concern for them in the U.S. The Prime Minister was somewhat surprised by our information and kept asking whether the refugees were in such bad condition. I informed him everything we know, including letters from these Khmer coming to us via Thai peasants. Now that line tells me very clearly that Kronsak, although he is for the measure of pushback, he doesn't know particularly how these refugees are getting pushed back. He is in Bangkok, which is many miles from, or kilometers from Aranyapathet. And he doesn't know, he is only given the command of pushback, and it is up to, for the Thai military, whoever is the commanders of those in the decision-making chain, to decide how to conduct the operation. And so this this has surprised him what is taking place here. And so he was probably good with pushback. He wasn't really taking action on it to make sure, Cambodians were not getting pushback or were getting sent to these areas. Some of it he wanted that to take place, as we had seen later in Quality Mercy said. He was happy of the kind of pleased at the furor it had created. So it would remain to see, but he did not make the decisions himself to do it. I said urgency was absolutely necessary in trying to get food in there, and I was dismayed at the inability so far to get food we had supplied. Prime Minister said he had given the orders to purchase 200 tons of rice and other commodities to be distributed all along the border to Thais as well as Khmer. He said he had to include Thais to make it palatable to the public. I asked whether he was sure that these instructions were being promptly carried out. He insisted they were. So this shows again the dilemma that's kind of in Kran Sak. Yes, he has public support for his population. The country of Thailand, the people don't want these refugees coming in. And the Thai military itself does not want that as well. And to go against that, to be in opposition to that, and to provide aid to refugees, to welcome them in, providing aid would mean more refugees would come in, is a very controversial position for him to take. And if he takes that position, there was the fear that he would be deposed in a coup d'etat. The military would come in and take over. And that was totally legitimate of him, and that is why there was such a hands-off attitude that was taken by Kran Sak. And it all comes from the fear of the borders. That somewhere that this border situation could destabilize our country, either by, again, the Vietnamese coming in or some communist factions coming through and spreading propaganda in the country. I said I was deeply concerned at the potential disaster to the people, as well as to the image and position of Thailand if the U.S., if the world learned that 5,000 to 10,000 Khmer repatriates starved to death on the border of Thailand. So that's a number for you guys. There has been a lot of dispute about saying, well, how many people died? It's exaggerated. I don't believe that number. Morin has here his estimate of 5,000 to 10,000. You really only know by the refugees who went down there what they say, like my father. But there are also numbers up to above the 10,000 for that. So he has here 5,000 to 10,000. We can say it's that those numbers there. That is a quarter of the refugees that went down there, and that's probably a low estimate for that. So again, if the world learned that 5,000 to 10,000 Khmer repatriates starved to death on the border of Thailand, because I wanted to inform him that if he wanted, we would take 3,000 Khmer along the border near Pravi here and move them to the U.S. within 30 days. If Thais let them into Thailand, given the number that were there, we could also move an initial 2,000. I'm offering this deal immediately. Both this proposal and provision of food were necessary. We were prepared to do the former because we felt the conditions were desperate. I believed in moving quickly on this problem was deeply in Thai interest. And then he goes, I asked him if he wanted me to assure him in writing of the willingness to accept Khmer's. And then we go on to section 6. Given the problem in the area, I asked him how quickly we be sure that he could carry out quickly and quietly. He said he would get Supreme Command General Serm over there right away, and he would take care of it. He then went on into a remarkable description of his problem in managing refugee problems. He could not trust many people in his government on this. This is what I talked about before. There were too many Thais, particularly military, opposed to any humanitarian approach to this problem. He felt that only a limited number of people could be relied on to carry out his instructions. He said he was having a difficult approach to refugee problems with perhaps his closest advisor, Interior Minister Lek. Lek felt strongly that Thailand must maintain a hard line. This was the first time I ever heard him even slightly criticize Lek. And then I emphasized again the urgency of the problem. He said he would call Serm over. Half an hour later, Serm appeared. He went through the whole thing again. He wanted those who came out to be gradually moved to processing centers. There would be no big movements. This would be all done quietly. So Morin is helping our country, the United States, my country, and the ambassador to the country of Thailand, he's an ambassador to the country of Thailand, is trying to help Thailand out here. Thailand made a huge mistake and was going to face a huge, damaging reputational problem. If everybody had learned that these refugees were sent through in such an appalling and despicable and diabolical way, the world would really be shocked, and it would be such a stain on the image of Thailand. And so Morin wanted all this conducted very secretly, and so that this would not let up, and that what would help fix the image is if Thailand made amends for this is by helping and welcoming refugees and giving them aid. Remember, this is 2 July 1979. Sturm said he would do it, although personally he did not look to be happy about it. Prime Minister later told me that Sturm agreed with him on this issue and would faithfully carry out the instructions. And then in Section 8, I made it clear to the Prime Minister this was a one-time shot. Morin Abramowitz has been really looking at your back here. It was limited in numbers and applied only to repatriated Khmers. There were dangers to it, but the urgency of the situation required me to make every effort. He said he clearly understood that offer did not imply anything about the future. He would try as much as possible to deal with the situation on the border. And then the last one is, I am deeply concerned about Thai ability to deliver the food. I thought it was necessary to make this offer to galvanize action by this. Number 10, Morin says, I do not take Kronsack's protests at face value, although I am convinced he would try to help. I remain concerned about General Thai ability to follow up. The Thai's army willingness to help along the border will be uncertain at best. I hope we can do our best to keep what we are doing out of the press, at least for a while. There we go. I'm going to read that again. I hope we can do our best to keep what we are doing out of the press, at least for a while. More. So that is the declassified cable done on July 5th, 1979. And that is very irrefutable. Anyone can read that. That is a blast from the past, like a time capsule that came out, 9 years ago. And this is amazing. I started learning, really trying to document this story in 2010 is when I rolled up my sleeves and started doing this. And after 40 something years, these archives and people's stories and books were starting to get published as well. And so everything's just coming out all at the really right time. It's been all very timely. But one of the things I think that this cable highlights is the position, as I had highlighted before, of Prime Minister Kronsak. It was very fragile, and he understood, Morin made it very clear that your country will have a reputational problem if you don't act on this. And right now, I've been looking through the comments and how people have said that this is wrong to slander Thailand. The country of Thailand did so much compassionately to help refugees. And I'm not going to be unfair about it, there were many people in Thailand, diplomats and Royal Thai government, who were very helpful. But initially, the treatment of refugees was horrifying. And initially, it was bad. It was pushback. You were only compassionate, welcoming, helpful, and providing aid only because you had to, it seems like. I don't know how else to look at this, but the Pravi here situation was going to be such a damaging thing to your country. Who knows how they would feel about your country, about the country of Thailand, and visiting and all of that in the press, how that would be perceived. But you had no choice. There was no choice, as Morin says here. This was an urgent matter, and you had to do this to make yourself as humanitarian and sympathetic to the cause of refugees as possible. So, as much as the people in Thailand have been told the script that you guys were the heroes in the situation, helping the refugees along the border here, because you guys cared about your international reputation, you had to. And the real heroes, I think, that need to be mentioned is the United States. The United States is really such an unprecedented country in what it did. And I know one of the reasons why I did this film was because of their legacy. And it's really not well publicized here in the United States. Nobody considers these people like Morin. And he just passed away. Nobody really said much word about how incredible he was for the cause. And there are all these State Department workers, and they did so much helping refugees. And you have to look at the light of this. Why? The United States had lost a war in Vietnam. What country loses a war and goes? Most countries lose a war and go in retreat. The United States lost one, but stayed behind and provided aid and assistance. That is a very different humanitarian spirit, and I think that serves a lot for lessons for the rest of the world. That should be the makeup of the way we think about war and conflict. If we're the ones ensuing the war, we should be responsible for all that happened in the lives that were deeply affected there. And I think if people counted the cost, like if these world leaders said, if I go to war, then I'm also going to have to think about taking care of the people who are affected by this afterwards. I think that if that were the case, the world would be a much better place. And this era along the Thai-Cambodian border serves as a strong example of that. And you can't ever say that that has never happened before in history. Yes, it has. And the United States did a very unique thing in being a world leader and a global leader on this issue, and deserves a lot of admiration for it. Now, you can see in Thailand at the same time, after July, August, more refugees are allowed back in. I'm sure that the Royal Thai government and people in office who were very much trying to help refugees were very embarrassed by what happened. And if refugee camps were allowed to be established, you have eventually later on, October, November, I believe, Tavi Dang is created. You have Rosen Carter, who goes to the Thai-Cambodian border in that time frame. And so there was a change in policy. Kronsak moves to be more moderate and allows refugees in. Now, I have to ask this question, is that I know people, Thailand would say that we helped bring in refugees, we allow these camps to be established. And you can go to Krabi Vietnam today. It is a memorial or museum. There's a small museum there. I've been there, and it's a show of just what the country had done. And yes, it was to some degree helpful at the end here when its reputation was on the line and at stake. But I think it did affect Kronsak later on. He would not allow to continue politics for, many, many years. He actually had to resign in the following year, early in the following year, 1980. And history would say it's economics. It was was it 1979, the state of the country economically. And no doubt that the refugee issue played a role in that. Yeah, and that certainly that him moving moderate was not pleasing as a policy for the country. And the next Prime Minister, Prem, would take a very different approach. He would make it harder he would allow refugees to come in, but he would provide very little. He would make it very uninhabitable to be a refugee on the border, as to not attract them to the Thai-Cambodia border there. So there you have it. That is the second document here, this cable. And last one I will go through is finally the article by Henry Kam. I believe it's the second article he has written in the New York Times. And this should spell out very clearly that this event, if those first two didn't, this is another one you can look up and you'll be able to see that this truly did happen, that these numbers are not exaggerated, that there were in fact 45,000 refugees that were taken away. And that's an estimate itself that was done because they were counting the buses that went back and forth and the number of refugee camps and stuff. But these many thousands and tens and thousands of refugees were sent to this place called Pravi here. Okay, so here's the article. Cambodia says Thai troops killed 300 refugees forced to the border. And I think this was the second article. He wrote this on June 23rd, 1979. The other article is up there, and the links I'll put down there, and you can find it on the website, pbfund.org. So it writes, Bangkok, Thailand, June 22nd. The pro-Vietnamese government of Cambodia today charged that Thai military forces had killed more than 300 of the 45,000 Cambodian refugees and drove back across the Cambodian border by shooting them or by forcing them to march across minefields. Many others died as a result of illness. In a broadcast from Phnom Penh Monitor here, Cambodia said 218 of the refugees have been wounded, epidemics have been broken out, and more than 10,000 of the refugees remain in the deep forest, exposed to mines, illness, and hunger. The radio station of the regime of President Heng Samrin had been noted for its untruthfulness since it took to the air after the Vietnamese capture of the Cambodian capital in January. But many of the details listed in the broadcast agreed with circumstances of mass expulsion that have become known here. So Henry Kam is saying that what the corrupt Heng Samrim is saying is corresponding to the details that we know as well, and numbers that we're capturing as well. And Morton read through that himself too. There are other cables that are out there of people's writing and letters back to the United States for help, or writing for anyone help, and they're describing the situation there. I can maybe in the future I'll put those up for anybody to read. So people were putting together the pieces of what has actually been happening. So the Phnom Penh regime, which had been known under full Vietnamese domination, charged the Thais with carrying out inhumane and savage act in collusion with China and remnants of troops loyal to the former Cambodian government of Prime Minister Pol Pot. The expulsion of the refugees, most of them ethnic Chinese, had been criticized by the United States and other Western governments. The broadcast, which Phnom Penh asserted was based on accounts from survivors, described scenes of horror. Tens of thousands of persons were crowded into dangerous minefields. They were living where the living had to sit near the dead, Phnom Penh reported. The narrow path inside a mountain pass on the border, along which the refugees were forced across, was known by Thai military authorities to lead through minefields laid by the Pol Pot troops to prevent Cambodians from fleeing during the regime's 4-year reign. So there you have it. The Thai military knew certainly that there was mines here, landmines there, thousands of landmines. Witnesses here had reported during the weeks of forcible transfer of the refugees to Cambodia that Thai soldiers warned the refugees not to try to escape back to Thailand because the area was heavily mined. On the afternoon of June 8th, according to the broadcast, 4 Thai officials using bullhorns shouted toward the Pravihir Temple, an architectural treasure standing on a cliff dominating the border area, that Thailand was going to push more than 35,000 Cambodians back across the frontier. Thai military sources contended that the expulsion was humane because they had been notified Vietnamese troops in the area of their intention, and that the refugees would therefore be taken care of. That, of course, was completely a lie. They knew completely that this was just a horrifying thing to do, diabolical. Vietnamese troops, however, were believed to perhaps be as far as 25 miles from the border, leaving the refugees to make their way through dangerous and barren no man's land before help could be attained. So there you go. And this is the other part, is the Vietnamese weren't even close to that area. They're 25 miles away. I think that's 50 kilometers, and yeah, it's 40 kilometers away. They're not that close. So why are you putting them in this area called Pravihir? In view of Hanoi's anti-Chinese policies, analysts here doubted any help would be forthcoming from the Vietnamese. Today's broadcast asserted that Thai troops and policemen wielding bayonets forced the refugees, who included many women and children, to enter the trail through the minefield by descending a ladder. It charged that the soldiers threw stones at those who hesitated. Thousands of refugees had told refugee officials in Bangkok that they had relatives in the West, and officials at the Western embassies had requested the Thai authorities to be allowed to take the refugees to transit camps for later departure to their countries. The broadcast reported that 20 women gave birth in the forest during the exodus. Just women and children, all of them are being sent here. It's not even just men being sent through a minefield. How can you imagine families themselves are being sent into this deadly terrain? One of the things that these documents show is the dilemma in which the Prime Minister Kron Sak saw himself in. He had admittedly a very difficult humanitarian crisis and a border situation on his hands. And he had seen how border crises and the spread of communism had really taken down so many countries before Thailand. You can speak of all around Southeast Asia, the dominoes falling down, and now was right up into the heels of Thailand. There were many in his country who took a very hardline stance against the incoming refugees, who were very Thai nationalistic, the people themselves, and the military. His position was to, given that support, to allow for the pushback of these refugees. If the international community pushed too hard on Kron Sack and forced them to be too moderate towards the refugees, they feared that he would be removed and deposed in a coup d'etat. And so that was why the West, or in the international world, didn't press further when, at the very beginning, in April and May, when they were already sending refugees off nearby mountains near Ulaanbaatar in the early days. And unfortunately, this gave permission for the Thai military to go out and further send the rest of 45,000 refugees to Pravi here. And they did that in worse fashion. So it seems like most of what can be placed on is who was in charge of this. It was more likely the Thai military than Kron Sack himself. And you can see that in history is the military who imposes its will in Thai politics quite a lot. In these documents, it also shows that the ambassador of Thailand, Morton Bromwich, United States ambassador, was gravely concerned about the public image of Thailand and wanted to get ahead of that and make sure that Thailand, and the only way he could do that and make sure that the public image wasn't defamed or damaged from this horrifying incident of sending refugees to Pravi here, was by forcing Kron Sack to take in human aid and to take in the refugees. And so you see in the coming months that is exactly what happened. And it leads up to the camps being built. You have Kavi Dam. You have in November the more aid coming in from the west. And you have what was Rosalind Carter visiting visiting the Thai-Cambodian border. We're not sure whether this policy was well liked by Thailand as a whole, because later on in the upcoming year, 1980, Kron Sack would have to resign from being prime minister. And so he probably faced many issues of a flagging economy, but this border issue with the refugees probably was played into that. This raises a lot of questions, though. Kron Sack allowed or was more permissible for pushback, but he was, as his documents show, he was very surprised about how these refugees were being handled. And you can read that, as I read before, that he was asking Morton Bromwich, are you sure about that? You can see how here he is in Bangkok, Thailand, and that is many, many, many miles away from the border situation in Ulaanbaatar, and let alone probably here. And so this decision was made somewhere in the military ranks. I've seen a lot of videos of people in Thailand and sympathizing with Thailand, as they had just reasons for having a low tolerance policy for sending refugees back to Thailand. I don't know how you can really justify doing that in such an appalling and diabolical way, which is to send refugees to a minefield. Why send them? You have many, many borders upon borders along the Dang Rek Mountains to choose from. Why not send them just a few miles back, a few hours back through Ulaanbaatar? Why did you choose to take them by bus overnight and transport them all the way to Pravi here? And for that matter, it raises another question. Why did you choose Pravi here as your site for deporting these refugees into? You could have chosen any other site, but you chose one of the sites that had actually probably the highest level of minefield, landmine concentration than anywhere else, because it was next to the sacred relic of Pravi Here Temple, which was heavily guarded by the Khmer Rouge at one point. And when the Vietnamese took it over, they probably put in more landmines as well. And so what statement was the Thai military was trying to make by this era? So that's the question that's asked, and that Thai people should not be asking their country. Why exactly was this decision made in such a way? Because nobody really, I don't believe anybody can really stand for such a brutal and barbaric act as that. Now, you might say that this is the only place where the Vietnamese were, and that the Thai military wanted to hand them off into this era. But I don't think I can really buy that argument, because there's plenty of expanse to choose from. The Vietnamese were all over upper west side of Cambodia, which is the eastern side of Thailand, near Rangapathet. You could have chosen that area, or you could have chosen a few more miles from there. Why did you decide so far flung out as Pravihir Temple? And it only can lead me to think about the historic disputes between Thailand and Cambodia over this temple. That this was done in vengeance and really as retribution and revenge for all the things, for the entire loss of the temple itself, going back to the 1967 international court case there over the ownership of the temple. The other one I can only think of is that it was to make a statement both to the refugees and to the Vietnamese troops. First, as my film said, is that these refugees were made to suffer as much casualty and losses as possible, so that maybe none survived, and any that did would tell the rest of the refugees, do not go back into Thailand, because they are just so punishing and brutal, and don't even dare to try. Another is to signal to the Vietnamese that don't come and mess with our military, or don't even come close to our borders, because this is how we treat innocent refugees. If we treat innocent people like this, think about how we are in combat with other people. So thank you all, and look forward to sharing my next video with you all.